And that's why the ICEWINE, the countries got together, the wine producers got together and defined parameters, what could be called ice wine. By law, the grapes have to be naturally frozen on the vine. So we'll press these grapes and we'll start pressing, and it'll take literally 3.5 hours before we start seeing a trickle of juice coming out.
So the yield is like zero compared to...
It's between 7 and 10% yield that we would get out of the still wines.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California. About to have a conversation with Randy Dufour of Arterra Corporation in Canada. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting, and always sponsored by... Actually, we're not sponsored by that anymore. So we will be sponsored by Total Wine in the near future. How about that? But not while we're here. We're here to have a conversation with Randy Dufour. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good to see you. You're on a trip. You're making the rounds, aren't you?
I am. This is a trip just through California right now, but then it's 2 weeks will be the Pacific Northwest, and then shortly after that, New York for New York Wine Experience, and then 8 markets in Asia directly from New York.
Wow.
So I put on the miles for sure.
You know, this is funny. Let me tell the listeners, you are with Arterra, which is the... I don't know, I guess in American terms, the supplier or the distributor of many brands in Canada, but particularly the one that we enjoyed yesterday, Inniskillin, late harvest ice wine. And we're going to talk about that, which is a pretty unique market segment of what we do, which is dessert wine for most people that are listening. Does it take that kind of effort to get out there and pour these wines in front of people to have them go, whoa? Because that's what happened yesterday at lunch when we had lunch together or dinner. I was like, whoa, again. Every time I taste your wines, it's a whoa.
Yeah, thank you. It's a unique opportunity. It's a unique category. Let's face it. You know, the opportunity to pour sweet wines. You know, we try not to refer to them as dessert wines because, as you would have experienced last night, they go with all kinds of foods, and it's the structure of the wines, the balance, the acidity that makes them, really great pairing wines with all kinds of dishes. But it's a really unique story, and the whole ice wine story and the Inniskillin story is unique, and it's a very well recognized brand, and it's a category that we built. And
well, for sure, and we'll get into all these ramifications. Yesterday, you were worried about what we're going to talk about, and we don't have time to talk about all the things I want to talk about. But let's just explain ice wine to the listeners, because and some of the legal ramifications of the term ice wine. Important to understand, but ice wine basically is wine from frozen grapes. Sure.
So first of all, we're coming from the Niagara region up in Ontario, Canada. Very, very warm days in the summertime. In fact, 95% of the wine that we make is actually table wines, still wines. But we also have great conditions depending, I guess.
In general, the Niagara Peninsula,
the Niagara Peninsula, for sure.
Maybe some folks listening, had their honeymoon in Niagara Falls, but.
So we're located on the south shore of Lake Ontario. So Toronto would be on the north shore. The Niagara Peninsula would be on the south shore of Lake Ontario. And then just east of us would be Niagara Falls. So we're about 25 minutes from the falls.
Okay, so I was reading something the other day. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew we were going to have a conversation, but I brought it up yesterday at dinner that the Canadian side of the falls is apparently prettier than the American side.
It is.
By design,
maybe
I suppose.
That's a part of a little bias, but without a doubt, the best viewpoints are from the Canadian side, because you don't really get to see the American falls, and the best view is either from the Canadian side or from the river itself.
And you said something yesterday that was amazing. The amount of water, the fresh water that's supplied to the world, I guess.
Yeah, well, the whole Great Lakes system. So you have Lake Superior flows into Michigan, Lake Michigan. Michigan flows into Huron. Huron flows into Lake Erie. And then over the Niagara River, over the falls, into Lake Ontario, and then out the St. Lawrence Seaway. But 20% of the world's fresh water supply flows over those falls.
I mean, you think about that. From a square mile standpoint, it's like a tiny percentage of the total water mass of the world. Yeah. But it handles 20% of the fresh water supply.
Yeah. And if you've seen the falls up close, you can see the not only the speed of the water going over, but the power, and it's pretty amazing.
Is there a threat to that supply? Is it coming from way up?
Well, we do know that the falls recede about 3 inches a year. So
really,
maybe not in the immediate, but probably another 1,000 years from now, who knows when those falls will go back to, for sure.
We were just talking about the warming, which is happening, and who knows, but that's a phenomenal thing. All right, so let's get back to wine.
Sure.
Since you're there, I thought I'd pick your brain a little bit about that. But so ice wine, there's ICEWINE. I showed you a bottle in my cellar here from a German company. It's obviously in German, and I think on your labels it says ice as in the English word ice,
spelled ICEWINE, one word, and it's the legal definition and proper spelling of the ICEWINE standards that were ratified by the U.S., the German, Austrian, and other countries to come to a general standard on what could be called ice wine, similar to the German and Austrian, but just maybe a little bit stricter in terms of when we can pick and at what temperature.
Okay, so it's regulated as a style of wine.
A category.
So it's not like an appellated restrictions like in the Burgundy or Bordeaux or Italy. It's more of, if you're going to call it ice wine, then it's got certain ramifications.
Yeah, you have to follow certain standards. So the first, as I was saying, we're right in the middle of our table wine harvest right now. But we will designate certain vineyards, certain rows that will be set aside for ice wine production. And we'll just leave those rows and or vineyards, and we'll wait, and we'll wait, and we'll wait. Well, the leaves will fall off, and then we'll net the vineyards, because if we don't net them, the birds will get at it.
Oh, yeah.
And we're just waiting for 3-4 months that these grapes are hanging on the vine, and they go through all the weather ramifications, rain, sleet, snow, wind, freezing, thawing. And through all these cycles, the grapes are concentrating during this process.
So they end up looking like raisins?
They don't look like raisins. There's only a little bit of dehydration that's going on.
Oh, really?
It's more about concentrating the flavors.
So so you pick at whatever bricks you're going to pick, the sugar content you're going to pick for the still wines, and then now the concentration continues. But because of the cold, it doesn't turn into these little, what normally would happen, it would just turn to raisins.
Yeah, and we don't have the conditions that we would incur noble rot, so the botrytis.
Right.
And if you did have any noble rot or botrytis, there's no way these grapes would be allowed, you could last on the vine for an additional 2 or 3 months. They would just fall off.
Happen.
So if we do see any, we do cut it off, but it's pretty rare that we even see it. So these grapes are going to hang on the vine, and we're going to wait. It's really going to be temperature oriented, where, we don't know when we're going to pick. It's really when the temperature hits 17.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is minus 8 degrees Celsius.
Have a listen to Angelica Mabray. She just came out. She is the wife of the famed digital marketeer Paul Mabray and think tank author Paul Mabray. And she is the director of Donham Estates in Napa, sporting 21 different Pinot Noirs, mostly vineyard designates. Incredible place. And also sort of the author of, or the director of, this new methodology in the wine business, which is experiential innovation. In other words, when you come to the winery, you don't only taste wines, you experience the winery. And she has an incredible art collection throughout the vineyard. So check her out, because it's a really interesting conversation. As well, Stephanie Franklin was on the show a few weeks ago, and she was sitting at home with her friends, having a drink, having a glass of wine, and realizing they were not happy with corporate America and what they were doing, though being well paid for it, and decided to venture off into the wine industry. And she is the president and CEO of Fly Wines, and I'm waiting for my samples now, dying to taste these wines, but is loving her life now because she gets to do it on her own, understanding how tough the wine business is.
And at that temperature, the water content in the grapes will freeze, but not that little droplet of nectar in the middle of the grape. And if it's colder than 6.8 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 14 Celsius, everything will freeze. So we really have a small window of opportunity.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we're picking between, some folks start at mid-December, and we typically are more into January, because we want to see several cycles of of hitting these temperatures to make sure the temperature inside the grape is at that temperature. And because the water is going to freeze, but not that nectar, we will go out in the middle of the night when the sun is not out because we don't want to see any warming. And we'll actually, when we harvest, we'll actually bring the presses outside, these big basket presses with hydraulics. We need to use the hydraulics because nothing else will press these grapes. And so we dump the grapes into the presses, and then we start pressing. And it's thousands and thousands of pounds of pressure exerting because they're like marbles, right? These are frozen.
They're frozen, balls, I guess. Right?
If I throw it on the ground, it's going to bounce back up.
Okay, so this is fascinating, and I certainly cursory knew the process, but didn't understand the nectar not freezing part. You wanted it from this history because I don't know how far back it goes in Canada, but certainly in Germany and Austria, those places, it goes back pretty far. That somebody came up with this idea in the first place.
It was a mistake. It was an accident.
Oh, it was.
So in 1794, these monks in Franconia, Germany, had gone off to a retreat, and they were winemakers. That was their livelihood. And they had gone off to a retreat, and while they were away, a freak storm came through and froze, a deep freeze of their vineyards. And if you have ever grown any kind of fruit or flowers or vegetables, once you have that first frost, it's done.
Yes, toast.
So these monks apparently were quite devastated. This was their livelihood. Desperation, entrepreneurship, I don't know, but they decided to press the wines anyways. And it was the best wine that they had ever made. But Germany and Austria don't get the conditions.
Even the monks figure that out, right?
Well, they don't have the conditions that they will have those conditions every year. And so the risk of leaving these grapes on the vine, hoping that you're going to have these freezing conditions, only happens 2 out of every 10 years. And so it was only made commercially 10 times between 1790 and the 1960s when better forecasting tools came into effect. It wasn't even classified by the German government until 1962 as a category.
It's relatively young in regards to the wine and something as what would seem to be as historical as this beverage. And so I remember there's some conversation during my readings in the early days about Americans doing this, but using commercial refrigeration to freeze them, which is, I think, illegal under the standards of the European standards.
Well, and that's why the ICEWINE, the countries got together, the wine producers got together and defined parameters, what could be called ICEWINE. And by law, the grapes have to be naturally frozen on the vine.
Wow.
So we'll press these grapes and we'll start pressing it. And it'll take literally 3.5 hours before we start seeing a trickle of juice coming out.
That's unbelievable.
It's literally drip.
So
drip,
the yield
drip.
is like zero compared to...
It's between 7 and 10% yield that we would get out of the still wines.
Really?
And, people talk about how expensive ice wine is, and it is pricey. But when you understand that it takes, on average, 10.2 pounds of grapes to make a half bottle of ice wine.
Right.
And, go to your local grocery store, buy 10 pounds of grapes.
Yeah.
And then tell me how expensive
See how that looks.
Our bottle of ice wine is.
And then look at a $3.75. For the listeners, it's the most ice wines are in a half bottle. And they are not inexpensive. But what's amazing about them is that, and yesterday was my first after 35 years of having ice wine paired with regular part of the meal and not part of dessert, which we brought up. It was fascinating to experience. But every time I pour them, at least in my house after dinner, particularly the Enniskillen ones, which you didn't see in our cellar, but it's here. People, they're flabbergasted.
Yeah.
They seem not to be able to get enough when they first taste it. And so it's wide opening. So we were talking about earlier the botrytis, and for the listeners, botrytis is a rot. It's called a noble rot. It's the premise of wines like Sauternes in France and other parts of the world. It's a mold that grows on the grapes. It has to be a particular mold, and then they crush it. Again, yields. Those grapes do look like raisins when they're crushed, but they do carry a different structure. And I noticed last night or yesterday when I smelled the wine, when I sniffed the glass, I was looking for that botrytis character, and it was void of that.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. So when you talk about these with vendors, for instance, when you're this big tour you're on,
Yeah.
do you get into those conversations about pairing with food as we did?
All the time. And I think, it would be a differentiator, our ice wines versus great wines like Sauternes. But if you think of go back to the basics, the idea of botrytis is the rot, the mold is, as it encapsulates the clusters, it's sucking the water out of the grape, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's removing the water. The idea of allowing the grapes, in the northern part of Italy, and they lay them on the mats, and they're allowing to dehydrate. Again, you're removing the water. Mm-hmm. And by us allowing the water to freeze and separate from that droplet of nectar, you're removing the water. Because when we're pressing, the water that's frozen is going to stay inside the grapes. So even after we've pressed the basket, the baskets of grapes, and there may be 4 or 5 baskets, I can't tell which ones have been pressed until because they're still fully solid. They're round. And only until I put it in my mouth, I go, oh, that one's been picked, or that one's been pressed already.
Wow, that's so interesting.
So we're removing the water, just like the other late harvest or sweet wine wines of the world. But because we don't have botrytis, because botrytis becomes that dominant characteristic in these wines. Mm-hmm. And by not having botrytis, we can maintain the purity of the varietal of the wine that's coming and the terroir where it's coming from. So when you do have a Riesling ice wine, you get those Riesling characteristics, the minerality, the citrus, the tangerine, the green apple characteristics that would come from not only from that varietal, but from that Pratt vineyard that I know where it comes from. And when I taste normal Rieslings, I get those same characteristics. Of course, not as intense as the ice wine. Or when it comes to Vidal, now you're getting more tropical fruit flavors: apricot, mango, lychee, pineapple, and of course the Cabernet Franc, which is the red ice wine. And now it's all about red fruits. And if we had botrytis, you wouldn't have that separation of the different varietals, and you wouldn't get those different experiences. They're made the same for the most part, but completely different wines.
Yeah, definitely the character, the nose of a botrytis wine does dominate. It's obviously part of its charm, and
yeah, for sure.
I guess for the Chateau Yquem, part of its price. But so actually, there's a question I was going to talk about yesterday when we were having dinner was, like champagne, I think a sparkling wine in general, terroir is harder for entry-level tasters to find. And I was very interested because tasting the Jackson Triggs side by side with the Inniskillen, and then of the same grape, and then tasting the Cabernet Franc, it started to make sense, and you were starting to get the terroir. The finishes were different, but it did take that side by side comparison. I think most palates, if you poured that this again at the end of the meal, maybe be great with a cheese platter and things like that, would just go, wow, this is really good. I love the structure, I love the acid, but not necessarily pick out terroir. But you and
maybe I'm more familiar with it, and so I can recognize those vineyards where these grapes come from, and comparing it to other vineyards and in the area, or from still wines that we make from those vineyards. It's really 20 years I've been doing this, so working with those same vineyards for 20 years.
Something along the way, I don't know.
Yeah.
But what an interesting comparison to take the grape, the Vidal grape, which is a hybrid, and compare the still. It's kind of like it's hard sometimes to pick a grape like a Pinot Noir grape. Well, Pinot's a little easier than others, but you grab a Merlot grape or Cabernet grape or anything else in the Petit Verdot, and you might feel like you can sense what that wine, what the resulting wine is, or at least that it is Cabernet. And there's some obvious ones like Moscato, because they sell Moscato grapes at the market. And you can taste, oh yeah, I know this wine. But interested to know how that transfers with Vidal. If you taste a dry Vidal wine versus the late harvest one or the ice vine, do you sense this not compatibility? What's the word? The synergy between the two?
Yeah, and to be very frank, we don't do a lot of, at Inniskill, we don't do any still wines from Vidal.
Oh, you don't?
Others
Okay.
do. As you mentioned, it's a hybrid. It was originally developed in France in the 1920s, and it has the characteristics would be a very, very thick skin. It's a cross between Uni Blanc, the cognac grape, and Siebel, a Swiss clone. But the characteristics are very, very thick skinned. It has good natural acidity, aromatic. But the biggest benefit to it was the thick skin, and it was really developed to survive the northeast winters of North America. Because at the time, vinifera could not survive the harsh winters and just not being grown in the right locations. And so you did see a lot of Vidal out there. And again, as a table wine grape, it's just okay.
Yeah.
But as an ice wine grape, it's magical. 80% of the ice wine we make in Ontario is made with the Vidal grape.
You know,
And interestingly, when other places around the world wanted to, try the ice wine category, and I'll speak specifically China, they've become quite a force in ice wine production. And out of all the grapes, if you think of Riesling being the historical grape to make ice wine in Germany and Austria, when they were looking to plant their vineyards, they chose Vidal and they brought cuttings from Canada to plant in their vineyards.
I kind of feel like, it's cheating, like Cabernet is a hybrid. Like we cheated to get now this noble grape that's grown all over the world. And now we have this ice wine. And now China's stealing not only our technology and everything else that they steal from us, but they're stealing our Vidal grapes and making ice wine. I've never seen a Chinese ice wine in America. Very few even still wines have I seen. Have you had them?
Yeah. I've been going to China for 28 years in the wine business, and it has changed dramatically. And, the industrial wines that you would have seen 28 years ago were, just that. And they're really finding some interesting sites now up in the mountains and, north of Beijing. And there are some, and far, far away places, but they are making some world-class wines. And every time I go back there, the quality just gets better and better and better.
Well, had a chance to taste the Lafite version, which is $500 a bottle.
Yeah.
And this was their 11th vintage that they finally got to where they wanted to go to produce, to market it. So I don't know what they did with the first 10 vintages, but it took a little while for them to figure this out down there. And I was reading an article yesterday in Jancis Robinson about a buddy of mine, or at least an acquaintance, who was on the show, Mark Jurgensen, and he had convinced Bhutan, I think it's Bhutan, it's a neighboring Indian country, to plant grapes. And the article that Jancis wrote is pretty specific about the terroir and how just getting to these vineyards is crazy. And you were talking about the animals getting to the birds getting to the grapes. They have monkeys, and monkeys are protected, so they can't. They don't know how to protect the vineyards from the monkeys who've taken all the grapes. Which
but I think in a lot of places, like if I go to Tuscany, it's the wild boar.
Yeah, right. That's
like
true.
Everybody has something that is trying to eat those grapes.
That's an interesting thought, because that certainly would lead to a conversation about sustainability, and certainly I think the wine industry, of all industries in the world, would be one that should adopt sustainability in producing its product. What's the effort at Inniskillen for that?
We're part of this planet, right?
Yeah.
So we have to participate in sustainability, and right across the board. So we are designated as sustainable producers. All of our wineries are in Niagara from our company. And, just things like what we're doing with just everything that we're looking after, the pumice and things, the leftovers, and what are we doing with those? And, figuring out a way of an engineering company to digest these and turn it into good gas instead of bad gas and going into the landfill. So there's all kinds of these great things that we're doing. The design of our buildings, trying to utilize better heating and cooling methods that, we just didn't think about 25 years ago, but now as a must. that we have to do.
A must, no pun intended.
No
that's a
must, no pun intended.
And, you did tell that story yesterday. I want you to touch on it now. The idea, and all I could think of when you were talking about the pumice, which is the leftover spent yeast cells and all the things that come out of a wine vat, that it was the source of grappa, in the peasants' days, and now it's turned into firewater, which I can't drink. But that's an interesting thought. So you don't do that. You don't distill this away.
We don't.
What do you do with it?
So what we used to do, I mean, you would move some into the vineyards to act as, just to help with the soil. But the volume that you're dealing with is pretty excessive. And so our winemaker, our Bruce, decided, he was horrified at the idea of this. And he had gone to school with some friends who are biological engineers. And they were working on a project of taking some of this pumice and other things and, like I said, turning it from, bad gas into good energy and heating not only our winery, but a couple, several dozen homes in the area.
That's interesting.
And I think we were the first in the world to come up with this, but now I think every winery does this to a degree. Maybe not in Italy or in northern France, where they can turn it into something magical, right, whether it's grappa or eau de vie, but you have to do something with it.
It's just interesting because there's a lot of conversation in the industry today, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday, but they're talking about innovation, and that's just sort of an open door word that's a buzzword, in my opinion. I'm going to have actually a professor of innovation at University of Southern California on the show to talk about how he would apply that to the wine world. But there's a lot of fronts for it. It could be packaging, it could be in the vineyard, it could be in the winery, it could be experiential, meaning for the visitors of the winery getting something unique, visiting a sustainable winery. There's a lot of fronts that innovation can change, but nothing, the product really doesn't change. And one of the guys, meaning it's still the same product as it was 10,000 years ago. It's fermented grape juice, right? Yeah. And it does something.
Maybe the packaging and the vessel has changed.
Right, and maybe that's innovation, maybe it isn't. I had an interesting conversation with the Sorlus family in Los Olivos. Great winery, wonderful family, intelligent young man. And he goes, wine bottles are recycled sand, and cork is recycled wood, bark. And, and I go, wow, that's kind of an interesting thought process, because the reason I brought it up, I had Professor Sachs, Gavin Sachs of the Yale of Cornell University, talking about the food grade lining of cans, and his position was, I'm going to create this food grade lining that'll last 24 months, which means that doesn't last 24 months today.
Yeah,
and I thought, okay, because the sustainability part of a can is considerably, the carbon footprint is considerably less than a glass with a cork. I go, okay, so I'll buy that argument. It's a good argument. I'm not sure I'm like, the food grade lining of my wine thing to be breaking down, but I think with a can that's used properly, and this is going to open a can of worms, so to speak, no pun intended. If it's properly used, like a beach or by the pool, and you don't want to break glass, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But certainly from a fine wine standpoint, we're not going to see Inniskillen in a can.
You know what? I think you're not, only because, as you mentioned, the longevity. We make ciders, our company makes ciders in Canada, and we're pretty cautious about where we would send these ciders because they're in cans. And, by the time you produce it, it's in a warehouse. By the time it gets ordered, it gets shipped overseas, and it gets redistributed. You were coming up to the end of that life cycle of that can. And so you got to be pretty careful. But that being said, technology is changing so fast. And so I'm sure, if it's not already, there's technology out there that allows for, a longer shelf life inside cans.
Things are changing so rapidly.
Very fast.
Which is very interesting, because I went to the local store recently, and the can section was half of what it was last year. And during COVID, before COVID, I had sought to find good cans, just around the subject briefly, and I tasted about 100. the empties were around here for a long time, and they were, most of it was like, put it in a can. We're not going to really pay attention to the juice inside. We're just going to put it in a can because its methodology is for poolside or beachside or whatever.
Or it's trendy.
Yeah, and it was trendy. It was earlier, not really early, but early on. And, most of it was bad. But there were appellated, vintaged, and varietal wines in a can in a variety of sizes, like 128s or 125s to 375s to 500s. I mean, and 250s. It was crazy sizes. And I found 5 that I thought were pretty good. One Cabernet from Lodi. But then COVID hit, and I put the call out again, tasted about 75 this time. Most of them were the same exact wine that I had tasted the year before because no one bothered to make more, or they made less of them.
Oh, same bottling run.
So now I find out that the food-grade Lenny doesn't last 12 months.
Yeah.
And it was obvious, and not obvious that, chemically, but obvious to me that the wines were not fresh, even though they're in a completely sealed can, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I found nothing during COVID that was canned that I would sell. I didn't even do it that year. So that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think I can't speak for other producers, but the can movement, I think it was pretty trendy, and I mean it was really driven by the craft brewers, right? And everybody
that's true.
was doing and cans. In fact, there was a can shortage for a while.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, because it was all being taken on by the craft brewers, and now that looks like it's slowed down a little bit, and so the trendiness maybe isn't there now. It's more about functionality in terms of, as you mentioned, whether you're going to the beach or to the park or in the stadium, where you don't want to be people throwing bottles out onto the field, or
that's a good point.
So there I think there are absolutely venues and occasions where cans are perfect.
Yep.
But probably they're not drinking in a skillet.
You're not drinking a late harvest
at these occasions
wine
either. So.
That's not going to happen. Well,
not in my lifetime, which won't be that much longer. But
I've only been doing it for 20 years. Because there was a woman sitting where you're sitting, and she was fairly convinced that the classified growths of Bordeaux were going to be in a can one day, and I thought, that's not going to happen. And I think that's because, or I feel that way in my romantic view of wine, is because it's not just this alcoholic beverage that's got 12 or 14% alcohol, in your case 9.5%. It means something else to the human condition that the proper wine is in the proper
vessel
environment for the proper time. And I can certainly see somebody going to a ball game or the beach and wanting a decent wine. And I think that's changed. I think that there are now more varietal specific and vintage specific, maybe even appellated wines in a can. The Tetra Paks, I think about the days in that picture I showed you where we were selling Matus and Lancers, and there was Bartles and James wine coolers, and there was Cold Duck in the cold box. Those were all not seasonal, but they're generational glips and blips in wine. What hasn't really changed, like I said earlier, is what wine is. What it does to you, and why we get together and have a glass of wine, and I think generationally, eventually, they all come around to a glass of wine like Enniskillen.
Well, and as we see this wine industry in a little bit of trouble right now, right?
Yeah.
The consumption is down. And what did, those wine brands that you were referring to from the 70s, what did they did? Well, they brought an entire generation into the wine category.
That's right.
That weren't there before.
Right.
So what do we need to think about? And again, this is not an Enniskillen comment, but just as a wine comment, but what do we need to do as an industry now to bring that next generation into the wine category? Because we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. My dad used to tell a story, and I was able to sit him down before he passed away. When he was always lucid. He never had mental issues that way, like Alzheimer's and like that. But he a couple of years before he died, I sat him down reluctantly, and we went through amazing conversations about his career and how he got to this picture. And one of them was stopping at Sutter Home in 1974, and this young man named Bob Trincaro was behind the tasting room. It was just him and just the two of them. And he says, "My dad," he goes, "You seem like you understand what's going on here. I've got something I need to figure out what to do with." And he brings out the shiner of of pink wine, and they tasted together. And my dad said something to the effect of, I think a lot of people would drink this. They'd come to the table because of this. And so every generation, I think, has those things. The Bob Trinchero will tell you himself or his kids that without Sutter Home White Zinfandel, there would be no Trinchero Estates, right?
For
They
sure.
don't make any money selling the good stuff that they sell. So I think every generation has that, and I think every generation comes to the table eventually with a decent glass of wine. And so your question is like, what do we do? And I think all the indicators I have, and I wasn't willing to fight anymore. I spent 35 years doing this, sold a lot of wine. But I was getting into the bottom fishing, $10 bottle, slugging it out with people that are paying $1.50 a bottle. And we talked about that. And I wasn't going to do that. And I wasn't going to beg, borrow, and steal to buy a customer anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the sign of the times. Loyalty's off. There's no. For sure. I mean, Enniskillen would seem like a built-in loyalty because of its brand value, but
we're very established. We've got the awards. I think we have the quality, and we're still actively working. But you're right. I mean, if you think of that $10 and under category or $12 and under, a lot of the big companies, the Constellations, the Treasuries, they're completely walking away from those that category, right? And so somebody's got to take that up because not everybody is going to buy that $200 bottle of Cab or
no. That's the interesting part, because the classified growth people I've spoken with recently don't feel the pinch at all. Now, Bordeaux in general has its issues, Côte de Bordeaux, stuff like that. But these classified growth, these guys are like, we sell everything we make. And so that's really not affecting that part of the world. And so then I had this question for them. Maybe you can contemplate on this. If the generations that are now not drinking as much as we hoped they would, and they're drinking RTDs, ready to drink cocktails, and they're drinking the disgusting, White Claw seltzers that are artificially flavored. When those people are older, like I'm a baby boomer, and I'm now into this wonderful part of the wine world. What's going to happen to those allocations? Are we going to see that the generation isn't going to be a collection generation?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Bordeaux and you mentioned the classified growths, which is a very small part of the Bordeaux wine industry.
Of course, yeah.
And the first to fifth growths are doing well.
Yeah.
But it's the folks the producers underneath that are really, really struggling, and the government is actually paying them money to pull out vines. So,
which is happening in California too.
Exactly. But the big guys are doing well, or maybe not the big guys, the famous guys are doing well, the expensive guys are doing well, but the $25 and under Bordeaux producers are really, really struggling.
So at Enniskillen, is there a demand issue right now?
We're struggling a little bit as the economy goes down, and when interest rates go up, right? So all of a sudden, that retailer that would normally take 3 or 4 cases of Enniskillen, maybe now he's only going to take 2, because he's not willing to carry that product for an extra 3 months and carry those interest rates. And when they were paying 2 or 3%, it wasn't a big deal. Once you start paying 8 to 10% interest on $250,000 inventory, that.
But restaurants and retailers are keeping
their
inventory so close to the bone.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's just a sign of the times and post-COVID. I mean, COVID was. I think I showed you the stack of Caymus. The only reason I have Caymus here, because they would never sell me Caymus. I was an internet retailer, and why do they need me? They're being poured off. The liter bottle of Caymus is cheaper than the $7.50 wholesale, and you get an extra glass. So for a restaurant that loves to pour this, right? But no restaurants were buying. And so guess who they call? Hey, we could use some help. And I'm like, okay, fine. And we couldn't keep it in stock. So those restaurants are still not spending a lot of money on wine. Yeah. And their lists are smaller. And when they run out of something, they probably don't rebuy it. So, and I can see it with the late harvest wine or an ice wine. That certainly that would be there'd be an effect there.
It is. I guess it is maybe a shrinking pond or shrinking lake, but somehow we've managed to hold our share of that lake and actually grow our share of that pond.
That's good.
So the segment is maybe declining a little bit, but our share of that is growing. And again, I think it just comes down to the unique characteristics of the ice wine. You know, we talked about the Sauterne wines, and you talked about the expression, you know, when people try it for the first time, and it's the acidity. And that is the magic of ice wine versus, especially the scale as ice wines versus other sweet wines is, and people will say, I don't like sweet wine. It's like, yeah, okay, I get that. But try this.
I forgot that comment. You're right. Yeah, that makes sweet wine.
And then this, you know, in 20 years, this is what keeps me doing this.
Yeah.
Is that expression on somebody's face. I even saw it last night. These you know, restaurateurs at our table that would really, really know wine, but maybe hadn't had Enniskillen for a little while, and the expression on their face when they taste it, put it in their mouth, it's like, wow, what is that?
My expression changed when I put the glass to my nose. I mean, I was like, wow, I forgot this, and I need to pull them out of the cellar here and bring them home and pour them.
Yeah.
You know, despite the, you know, that's an interesting thought. Because yesterday I went from one lunch to the dinner. I mean, I literally left Drago downtown at like 2:30 and drove to Sherman Oaks and got there. Made a phone call, and it was at 4:00. I'm eating again, so I'm not going to eat till later today. But I had one of the guys at the dinner at the lunch was a huge collector. I mean, one of those guys that I mean, wow. Just studies this stuff to the nth degree. And we were talking about how, depending on who's over at my house, what I pour, if I think they're going to appreciate, you know, a Bordeaux, a classified Gouffre Bordeaux or a Grand Cru Burgundy, I'm going to pour it because, A, I've got enough now, I don't have to do it all. But two, I want them to feel it. And so I had a winemaker in from the Pyrenees, young man. And so I'm like, wow, I'm going to pour some nice Bordeaux because he'll go, wow, look, I get the taste. Yeah. Does that happen with late harvest ice wine? Do people sort of, like versus a port, let's say, I could pour a port or I could pour an ice wine. Do people consider this caliber?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you just even look at price points where we're positioned on the market, but I think it's once people taste it and they just, it's this incredible expression, the enjoyment that they get out of it is incredible. And that's a big part of our job is education and reminding people how good this is and getting out and sharing the fact that this shouldn't be just designated as only, you know, that's why we like to refer to them as a sweet wine versus a dessert wine. Because the dessert wine the dessert category in restaurants is...
I'll stop talking. I'll stop saying that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But we prefer sweet wine because it is so diverse in the way because of that acidity. And that's the magic of it, I was saying, as for ice wine. And you, as you saw it last night, a whole menu of Thai food.
Yeah,
and you were
that was
about,
amazing.
You were talking about your lunch. I had a lunch of Indian food. And if you want to...
Wow, you went from Indian to Thai food? Wow.
Yeah, if you want to find a way to kill a lot of wines, you know, Indian food, and yet the intensity of the fruit, the concentration, but the intensity of the fruit balanced by that acidity and the low alcohol. That's also key. So when you think of a port has, you know, 18, 19% alcohol, Sauternes have 14.5%, the Enniskillen at 9.5%, because if you have spicy foods, it accentuates the alcohol.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So by having a lower alcohol, having the acidity, having the intensity of flavor, actually, it was great pairings. And you would have saw that last night.
I was amazed. And there was also that a couple of dishes had a sweet chili sauce type thing, which really did a great job of pairing it. But even with the hot sauce, I was flabbergasted by that and would love to figure out how to, you know, I'm pairing regular wines with regular foods, no problem. But that was a really interesting pairing. But you said education. That is an important thing to touch on for the listeners. The gentleman that sat there we were sitting yesterday morning was on a 2-week excursion from Italy educating, and that's who I had lunch with. And is that stepped up? Because I think part of our path now, at least for a little while, is going to be the education and the storytelling and people saying, yeah, I had this wine in this environment or at this place, and I'm wearing this patch. We didn't really talk about this yesterday, but this is Les Amis du Vin. It used to be a group, 150 chapters in America. I think we did talk about it.
Yep.
And that was an experience. They would show up, Mondavi speaking, Robert Bowser, Nathan Croman, whoever's speaking, Ron Fonte, the guy from the group. And so you would go home and say, well, that was fun. Next time we saw that bottle of wine, is that stepped up for what you guys need to do to get out and show the world?
Yeah, I think Enniskillen would be on the Canadian perspective, we would be the leaders in terms of, we have a dedicated export team. There's 5 of us that are traveling around promoting Enniskillen and Canadian wine. When we talk about Enniskillen, part of that conversation is Canadian wine, because especially in the U.S., I mean, outside of the ice wines, you really don't get a lot of access to the Canadian wines unless you
don't.
A savvy traveler and you've decided to go up to Canada and you would have a chance to try the Canadian wines. And a lot of people, I think you would be one of them. With your recent trip to Quebec.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
It's like, wow, I had no idea. And so we're starting to bring in some of our table wines here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, it's an ongoing job, right? Again, 20 years I've been doing this, and we're in 82 countries, and I have to hit as many countries as I can. And,
Fascinating.
I'll give you an example. We did a master class 2 nights ago at the Napa Valley Wine Academy.
Yeah.
I've done 4 distributor meetings in the last 2 days. I was in San Francisco in Napa. And after this, I head down to Disney and do a big training for the Disney team.
Wow.
So it's just a continuous job.
Well, it's that, and I think on your level, from the supplier level to the restaurants and to the wholesalers that are distributing your things, it's critical. It is relative to those people then doing it for the consumer, and the loyalty. The internet has no loyalty. It's price sensitive only, and that's why I got out of the business basically, because I wasn't prepared to take on that battle. But the people that are going to survive all this, at least on the consumer side, selling to the consumer, are the people that create those experiences to show up and have those dinners. And that's where the loyalty is going to come from, because you can't afford to pay $100 to buy a customer through Facebook or Instagram and only get $80 of lifetime value. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Eventually it catches up with you. So the education part of it, I think the experiential part is the critical part. It's
sharing that, that story, sharing that whatever glass of ice wine and having people experience it for themselves and going, wow, I had no idea. And then sharing how to, I can't tell you how many thousands of people that I've come across that have a bottle of ice wine but don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Or were given a bottle of ice wine because it is so highly gifted that don't know how to do with it. And, the first thing is put a bottle in the fridge. That's what I tell everybody. Have a bottle of
first step.
Bottle.
Step 1, put bottle in fridge.
In the fridge, because you are having people over for dinner, and you go to the store, or the cellar, but you're going to pull out your sparkling wine, you're going to pull out your white wine and chill that. You're going to have your red wine on the, cupboard table there, and you've had a great dinner, and then all of a sudden the dessert comes out, and somebody goes, "Don't we have a bottle of ice wine or a bottle of just sweet wine somewhere?" Yep. But it's not chilled. And the opportunity's lost.
It's gone, yeah.
So it's a half bottle, and I tell all my colleagues, always have a bottle of ice wine in the fridge. Doesn't take up any space.
No.
And you'll be rewarded. And when you do open it, don't wait for a special occasion or even a dinner party, because of that sugar acid balance, once that bottle is open, it'll stay fine in the fridge for a month.
Yeah.
So go
the sugar is
have a glass,
preservative in
put
itself.
it back in the fridge. Come back to it a week later. And
you start to sound like a champagne guy. Like, it's not just for celebrations and parties. It's, they come in here always, they're like, but you should drink all the time. And I made the mistake. I'm not sure I'm going to make the same mistake again. He can fool me once, I taught my son-in-laws about sparkling wine. And now, I have to keep my house stocked with those things. And it's expensive. So if I teach them about sweet wines like this one, it may, take me to the poorhouse. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But
he can bring them.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
From his fridge.
They're like, well, actually, it's funny. where you were standing, where the cellar is actually a Type 21 license, which is retail liquor and wine. Right. It's not mine. It's my son-in-law's and my daughter's, because I wasn't allowed to own it because of the felonies, because of the tight house rules. But let's talk about the still wines. We're out of time already, but I do want to talk about that because we didn't get a chance to talk about the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir we tasted yesterday. And I have to say I haven't had, if I went through that database, maybe there's a handful of still wines from Canada that have made it to the wholesale markets in Los Angeles. But when I was on the flight from Air Canada to L.A. 2 nights ago, and I had a choice between a Pinot Noir from Canada or a Spanish red, and I'm naturally, as the wine guy, taste that Pinot Noir, and it was delicious. I had 2 glasses of it. And I thought yesterday's wines were excellent, and I thought the Chardonnay specifically, and the consensus on the table, and I hate saying this, was that it did approach Burgundian character, though I thought it was more verbose and heavier, not heavier, fatter, to the extent of it just offered more weight. And I really thought it was great, and it had great acidity and structure. So clearly not a California a Chard, and clearly not French, but approaching the finesse.
And Ontario, and Niagara, Pinot Noir.
So how do you think that's going to go?
Well, we are, like I said, we're just about to launch a new wine brand called Le Clos Jardin. Sorry, new for the United States. We've been
Le Clos d'Argent.
We've been making for a while, and coming from the Niagara region, and it's a very unique and special area. And again, we're on the south shore of Lake Ontario. We talked about Niagara Falls, and the unique geography is, if you think of that 150-yard cliff that the water falls down on, well, that cliff is what we call the escarpment. And it's really just a 150-foot sheer drop.
Yeah, right.
And it wraps all the way under Lake Ontario, below Lake Ontario, and extends all the way out into Michigan.
So that geographical condition just carries on.
It just, the escarpment goes all the way. It's called the Niagara Escarpment, and it goes all the way into Michigan.
Yeah.
But it gives us the conditions. And when we talked about the water flow of the going into the Niagara River, before there was 5 Great Lakes, there was one lake, Lake Iroquois. So during the Ice Age, it was just one lake and one body of water. And after the Ice Age reversed and started going, the glacier started moving northward, carving up all this land. And what was left was these 5 Great Lakes. But this escarpment was the original shoreline of this Lake Iroquois.
Really?
And so the small, it's only between half a mile and a mile that goes from the south shore of Lake Ontario to the escarpment, and it's all these series of benches. And as you walk around and you see all these seashells and fossils, because it used to be the shoreline of this lake. And as you go a little bit deeper, what you find is shale, clay, and great dolomitic limestone.
Wow.
And with the cooling effects and the warming effects of the lake, combined with the escarpment and that soil, it is really ideal. And the cool climate nature that we have in Niagara, it really sets up for ideal conditions to plant great Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir.
Wow, that's great.
And that's, we're a relatively new region, so we're just kind of figuring out these sites. But that's where I think the excitement is. And, as you mentioned, it's not Californian, it's not French, and it's Niagara.
Yeah.
It's it's our terroir, and which we think is pretty special.
Well, I think certainly the wine speaks for itself in the quality. It's just brand building is tough, and you have all the competition that's going on, but you have a great distributor to do that, and you have educated people on the street to do it. But I think what's interesting to me is that if I was a white Burgundy drinker, I would like this. And if I was a California, at least not a non-Rombauer California wine drinker, Chardonnay drinker, I'd like it. It would speak to me because you sensed Chardonnay as a grape, and you sensed the acidity and the structure of it as just a fine wine. And so I'm excited to hear and see. And this is the exciting part of our business, is when you discover
new discoveries,
places to grow grapes. And it's interesting because you have some history to it. There's a guy in Missouri who's now trying to bring back American. They're not vinifera grapes, but they were wine grapes before the Prohibition, and he's got about, I don't know, 12 or 15. He's already thrown out like 4 or 5 because they just can't get wine out of them. They're worth a damn. But I'm telling him, I say, you have nothing to work from. You have no history of these grapes. You have no history of the soil. You have no history of fermentation technique. You have nothing. I mean, you are working with a permutation of variables that are, may never get settled on making wine that you can palate. But he's so hell-bent and passionate about bringing back these varietals that were, our ancestors' wines in America, even though they weren't, wine grapes, they made wine from them. And I'm like, wow, at least you have talented winemaking. You have a history of the type of soil that's there. And, you have a latitude that makes sense, as you spoke about yesterday, as far as those grapes are concerned. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, 30 years ago, you weren't allowed to bring in hybrids into Europe, right?
Yeah, right.
They were banned.
That's right, yeah.
And now in the last 5 or 10 years, because of climate change, and there's a lot of concern, and you've got these pretty interesting wine regions, winemakers that are actually starting to play around with hybrids again. And so we'll see what the next 10 years looks like. But I think you will see more interesting varietals start popping up from Europe that would not have happened 30 years ago.
Well, look at Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And what else?
Yeah, in the south, usually
Louis
where
Jadot.
it's hotter is typically where they're starting to experiment with, varietals that are a little bit more heat resistant, we'll call it.
I think the Louis Jadot winemaker was telling me last year that they have 9 hectares of experimental clones. Of course, they're still stuck with Chardonnay, and stuck. They still get to grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but they're experimenting with 9 hectares of clones, canopies, rootstock. They've just mixed it up to see if they can get, heat resistant, or at least heat tolerable grapes, from these things. We're out of time. We have still a lot to talk about. I didn't even touch on most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. We can do it again one day when you're back.
I would
down
love
here.
that, and I would love. I'd love to do it here, but I'd love to do it up in Niagara as well.
Well, because the kids are gone. Well, they're not gone. They actually seem to take more time now than they did when they were younger.
And now they want to drink.
Yes, and that's which I'm very proud of that because of my career, my father's interest in all this, that they have an appreciation for it, and they have an opinion of it. Not always thrilled with their opinion, but it's okay. Like my biggest critic is my wife. Like I know what she likes, and I try to move her off of some of the stuff. Yeah. Like she did big Bordeaux varietals and particular styles, and every time I pour a Syrah or something else, it's given back to me. Huh. And I'm like, no, this is really good Spanish Tempranillo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I think finding once people find what they like, right?
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Anyway, thanks for coming out on your busy day, and good luck at Disneyland. It's a lot of fun. I'm dying to see if you're going to go up to the 21 Royale. I'd love to be in there.
We talked about that last night.
See what's going on.
I have no idea what the plan is.
It's only $1,250 a person. So.
Oh, well, maybe you'll come and fund this for me then. I don't think that's where we're going. But, no, looking forward to it. And in terms of experiences, I mean, that's what Disneyland does, right? It's experiences. And so maybe I can learn something from them.
Yeah, but you're what? Hospitality-wise, who could you learn better from?
For sure.
Right?
For sure. But it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and to take part in this. And again, if you haven't had Canadian table wines or ice wines, do yourself a favor. And you've got the holidays coming up. There's nothing better with, pecan pie or pumpkin pie than a little glass of Cabernet Franc ice wine.
And I will look like a hero.
You will look like a hero.
Cheers.
Paul, thanks.